everybody, this is Nick with Audio Video Export. I hope everybody is well today. This is a recorded webinar and the first in the series. We started this webinar series, Jose and myself, last month in Spanish, and obviously it's just as important to do these in English. This is going to be hosted on our YouTube page. If you have not yet had a chance, you will find our new website available, av-export.com, same domain, just different web page. The dealer site has in fact changed. So if you had to log in on the previous site, please go ahead and log into or register on the new one. That way you can have access to all price sheets, promotional materials, etc. that are on the new website. Very important, lots of really great stuff, including monthly promotional materials that are updated all the time and updated training and education and marketing material and all of that for all of the good, all of the brains it is that we carry. We're focusing this series that we're doing here on, really it's all commercial based, given the fact that we're dealing with Harman Professional. We've got a mix of other products in here as well, so we've got NEC monitors, we have bright sign devices, we've got network and infrastructure devices, because it's really important for us to show our customers that Audio Video Export is not a one-hit wonder. We are a one-stop shop for all of the devices that it is that you can have. There are very few exceptions to that. So while Harman is an exceptional brand and our tier one go-to brand for all things audio and video in the professional world, they don't have structured cabling products and they don't have networking devices. So those kinds of peripheral devices we count on, and we lean on some of the other brands that we're going to review today. So we just wanted to share those kinds of things with you and show an all-inclusive solution for you. The other thing that we wanted to review is that this is actually a building block. So we've got a series of webinars that we're doing. The next one is going to be in 2 weeks on the 18th. And we'll talk about that towards the very end, but that'll be the next one. So if you haven't registered for that, please go ahead and do so. And we're going to be building on, when we review that one in 2 weeks, it's going to be a building block on what it is that we're reviewing today. This is the kind of most comprehensive today's. And it's really important. So again, this is being recorded. It's on our YouTube page. So for anybody who needs a brief review, I know that I can oftentimes speak very quickly, especially when it comes to my native tongue English. So if you need a review, or you want to just, you can either watch the video or ask for an update. Hey, Nick, how did you do that? Or can you explain a little bit more about what it is that you guys were talking about? Enough self-promotion. With us, we've got an amazing resource of ours, Jose Valcárcel, from a Harman Professional. He's based out of Puerto Rico, but he's perfectly bilingual. And as many of the Puerto Ricans that we deal with, I find, they've got, normally with us, we also have Luis Alfonso, who's on the line with us. He's got another meeting with us. Jose is our primary sales contact, but he's also very, very technically oriented, and Luis is the primary for level 2 or level 3 technical support and design assistance. So we've got some really great resources with us. And Jose, thank you for being with us today. Is there anything that you wanted to add before we continue?
Just I want to say thank you, Nick, for the invite, and say hello to all the people that are attending today this webinar. Hope everyone right now is well. So I'll be with Nick along the way today, and if any questions comes up, there's a chat window which I'll be monitoring just in case, and feel free to ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. So absolutely, make sure you do ask whatever questions. We will have, I expect to have time towards the end in order to be able to do a Q&A session. Thanks again. So let's get going. One of the things that I love about the Harman solutions is that really from very start to very end, if we think about a block diagram of an audio system, you've got your microphones or your other sources all the way to your speakers and everything in between. And Harman really has a solution for just about everything, with the exception of a streamer, in order to be able to download streaming music, which we would generally offer either a Sonos port or another streaming device. We've got all of the microphones from AKG. We've got sound processing from either Soundcraft or AMX or BSS, depending on what the application is, to amplification through Crown, and then speakers obviously being through JBL. One of the ones that's kind of like the oddball out, but it's important to mention and to point out, is really Martin Lighting. So oftentimes as audio video integrators, we find that it's right within our wheelhouse, and we're able to talk about the audio and the video, digital signage, amplification, background music, foreground music, point source, concerts, live events, whatever the case may be. But as it relates to lighting, whether it be for a permanent installation where you've got lights that are mounted into the concrete sidewalk that are shining against the side of a building, or a projector, and I'm not talking about like an NEC projector where you're displaying video and whatnot. What I'm talking about is you've got a gobo on the side of the road on the side of the building where you've got a very bright fixed image that you want it to be able to display there and show that, or whether you want it to be able to do an event for a live audio, a tour, or a concert, where you've got moving light heads and whatnot. Martin Lighting is really the premier brand. And there's some other competitors that are out there that are a little bit less expensive, you'll find, but they don't have the quality that Martin has. And really it also has to do with binning and the quality of the LEDs that are used inside of those devices, that really Martin is just second to none as it relates to quality, reliability, and color matching. So, if you buy a light today and then you need to add on several other lights in 2 or 3 or 4 years, you can count on the fact that the red is the red. It's going to stay the same and consistent across the board, and you're not going to have to worry about, oh, well, it's a little bit off, as you might with one of the other competitors that's a little less expensive. So, just some points to note. As we talk about a hotel system, these are some of the different considerations that we want to be able to review. So what always I love to be able to do for a design of a project, and we're talking about theory and whatnot, is, hey, let's talk about an actual project. So I've got some plans and whatnot of an actual project that we had quoted in for some time ago. And, so we can look at some plans and see what, an actual scope of work would look like and what we would do in different situations. So some different areas that we want to consider and be aware of. We've got a lobby and reception area, fitness area, spa, all these different points that are listed here on the screen. And we'll review all of these different points, included of which that are not necessarily audio, but they are video, would be, an NEC monitor or a projector, some bright sign, digital signage, as well as the illumination that we were talking about before. When it comes to a lobby and reception area, there could be any number of things that we're talking about in a scope of work, whether it be just simple background music and that's all they want and that's all they care about, to something that might be a little bit more involved, where people want to have a microphone for emergency announcements, inside of not necessarily a lobby, but you might have inside of a hotel system, which is a greater scope of this webinar today. You would have a restaurant, so you would need an announcement system. Jose, party of 2, your table is ready. All of those different kinds of applications. In a lobby and reception area, you would probably also have some digital signage, whether it be a welcome, and amongst which, you could have, with Bright Sign, you've got some options for, weather and, Uber and whatnot, and traffic scenarios, as well as touch monitors. So you've got all sorts of different options for a lobby and reception area, and it's really important to dial into what the scope of work actually is. So this is the lobby and reception area. You've got over here the entrance.
Nick, I'm sorry to interrupt. I don't know why I don't see your screen. I'm just only at this time, the main, now I got it. Thank you.
Perfect. I didn't hit the button. So we were talking about a couple of other different things, and awesome. And thank you for interrupting. Feel free to do so at any point in time. All right. So here we've got an actual layout of a job that we did. I'm also getting a message for no audio. If you can hear my audio, if you can raise your hand and then lower, that'd be awesome. Looks like this person is having difficulty with audio because they are not connected to the audio. Everybody else should be hearing me just fine. So as we can see here on the right-hand side, we've got our driveway entrance to the lobby area, and then we've got our reception area right here, which is where you're going to do the guest check-in right here, as well as some exits. The primary exit to the main hotel is this walkway, which is actually exposed. There's a little gazebo, a little exposed walkway, and then this goes into a building, which we'll see, and all of that's included in the scope of work. Right? They wanted to have background audio music, they wanted to have digital signage, and they wanted to be able to put a little bit of lighting on the outside. This is the out part of the walkway. So you have the walkway, the gazebo, the other walkway, and then you've got this, which is now inside, and we've got our lobby area, and then we've got hallways to our first. We've got some rooms over here, and we have some rooms down the far side. I didn't mean to skip ahead. Right, and then again the lobby area right there. So on the exterior, what we wanted to do is we wanted to do some lighting just to be able to highlight some plants and highlight the entrance area. Sometimes when you get those beautiful columns and a covered entryway where there's a walkway, you want it to be able to highlight those columns with some light. This is a good example of an exterior wash. This is the exterior wash 100, and you have a white only version of this, and then you have the RGB. So, which allows for you to be able to do different colors, not just red, green, and blue and white, but also variations of those. Because as we know here in audio and video, in video in particular, obviously we've got we can make different colors based on those three colors. So obviously this is IP66, as you can see here. It's IK08. So if you're less familiar with that, that means it can take a hammer to it. So it's anti-vandal. It's the same kind of situation that we see on bullet and dome cameras for security, where a person would need to make sure that we've got some vandal-proof protection here. So if somebody accidentally tries to run over this, it might get, the angle might get changed, but the device, unless it's like a really nasty, run-in, depending on with what, it should be able to take the hit. Now, with regard to the monitors, we've got a wide selection. So the very large monitors that we've got here, and really the photo doesn't do it justice. Here we're looking at a 90-inch monster. And sometimes you can do this with a video wall. So as it relates to a video wall, you can do a 2x2 at 49 inches monitors each and get to the same size. But when you're looking at less than 100 inches, for me personally, I like to have the 98-inch monitor. Or the 86-inch monitor or the 75-inch monitor. And the reason for that is if you're always going to be in a giant single image, it's less moving components and it brings the cost down for the same desired effect, right? The desired effect being a very large single image. If you wanted to do something that was going to be larger than that, you could do a video wall. You could do a 2x2 at 55 inches, and now you've got a 110-inch wall, or you can do any size of that. So it's really, really great that you've got some flexible options. There are brighter options. So if you needed something that was 98 inches but a little bit brighter than the 300 nits that comes in the C series, you've got a 500 nit variety, and then you've also got high brightness varieties from NEC as well. The great thing about this is that it also has the OPS cards for the bright sign, which I'll review in a moment. Simple power protection, we've got Panamax if you just needed something cheap and cheerful that's going to sit on the back side of the monitor. And then you've got all sorts of other options, whether it be a filtration. I've got some guys on here who are with us who are experts in power protection and Panamax. So, but for those who are a little bit more entry level into it, depending on the country that you're in, I know that Barbados and Jamaica in particular, we have to be careful because you guys are 110 volts, but you're 50 hertz, not 60. So we just have to make sure that we're quoting the right thing. In this particular case, the MIW Surge 1G, it is 50/60 hertz, so there's no problem in that, and it's 110 volt only. If you're on one of the islands that uses a 220 volt product, there's no problem for that. So I know that we've got some islands that are half the island 110 and half the island 220. So we have products that are similar to this that will fit in your application. So just keep that in mind as we're discussing. This is the go-to kind of Mac Daddy of all of the BrightSign. If you're not familiar with BrightSign, it's really just an oversimplification of it is that it's a computer. It's a very inexpensive computer. This device in particular has an HDMI input to it, and but at the end of the day, it's an oversimplified computer. It runs really well. It's designed to run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's got its own proprietary software. You don't have to worry about Windows updates or Apple updates. And I know that a lot of people, well, why don't I just stick a Windows machine? You could. Oftentimes in this kind of format, it's going to be more expensive than what it is that you're looking for, but you also have to worry about updates. You have to worry about a keyboard and mouse. You have to worry about all those other kinds of things, whereas BrightSign, you don't have to worry about that. In this case, you can see that the retail price, this price, forgive me, was from before April 15th. It just went up just slightly. And any price that you see on here is going to be MSRP. It's not going to be your dealer cost. The XT1144, it's got an HDMI input, so you can bring in whether that be a cable box or a satellite box or some other sort of other device, and then you can put, you know, a ticker at the bottom. You can put weather widgets. You can template that. You can do all sorts of really neat things with the BrightSign device. Now, BrightSign also has what's called an OPS. OPS stands for Open Pluggable Specification. And what that does is that's going to sit inside the backside of the NEC. So you don't actually have to worry about mounting it anywhere. It actually just slides right into the NEC, and it's just like an input on the NEC. And it's really great. Okay. So there are lots of really great options from BrightSign. Other things that we're going to be considering in this particular scope of work is the Blue 806DA. Now, this is the top of the line processor from BSS. And the reason for that is that it's got the Dante built in. It's got the Mac Daddy processor. It's got the Mac Daddy of the memory and storage. And the idea here is that we can process not just your analog inputs and outputs. We can do digital inputs and outputs, which I'll show you in a moment. We have the Dante protocol, which you can see is a primary and secondary, which connect directly to a network switch. And then the network switch will, you can send that just about anywhere on the network. And the advantage of Dante is that it's not limited by distance because it's on the network switch. Assuming the network switch has a fiber port on it, which our Luxel switches do, you can then transport that over fiber. And on fiber, depending on the SFP, you can go 70 kilometers. So distance really is not a limitation with Dante, which is awesome. Jose, what are the limitations of Dante that we've got here? Is it a channel count? Is it what are some of the pros and cons of the Blue Link, which we've got here, versus Dante?
Well, mostly when we talk about Dante, Dante belongs to Audinate. That's the name of the actual company that developed this type of protocol. And Dante, it's as I said, this is a way to transport signal from point A, B, C, and D. That said, our 806 processor, the way that you see it at this time, can handle only 64 inputs in Dante plus 64 outputs in Dante. If we need more channel count, then we need to add another 806 in order to have those 64 by 64, or you can add a Blue DAM, okay, which I'm pretty sure you will talk later regarding that. If you use our Blue Link, the proprietary protocol, that expand the possibility of channel counts. We're talking now 256, but that goes, it's a proprietary protocol that deals specifically with Harman products. So that said, the Blue Link transport at this time, you can use it between BSS products, Crown products. Okay, that will be the main difference between the Dante and the Blue Link at this time.
And the Blue Link doesn't touch the switch here. So we're talking about 100-meter maximum distance, device to device. It can all be in the same rack. It can be across racks. Again, your distance here is 100 meters. So standard, network protocol, but it does not touch the network, right? So it's going to be your in to your out, and you'll see that in a little bit.
Yeah, basically our Blue Link will be like some type of daisy chain type of situation versus the Dante situation, which is a networkable, type of IP address, which is totally different.
Right. So in this particular case, we're going to use this Ethernet port in order to be able to speak to the device and to do the configuration. These two devices are going to be, it can be to the same network switch. It doesn't have to be, or it can be a different network switch. It doesn't really matter. You can do that via VLANs and whatnot, and that's a whole nother webinar for another day. But those need to be connected simultaneously. So this primary connection at minimum for the Dante transport, this is going to be for your configuration, your communication protocols, including how to be able to talk to the network keypads, which we'll review in a minute. And then these Blue Link devices, it'll go out of this device into a Crown amplifier. And then if you wanted for redundancy, you could go back out of the amplifier back into the Blue Link in case a rat chews or a contractor accidentally cuts a line. You've got redundancy there. Now, the one thing to note here also is that this is one of the open chassis. So even though it's populated here, your input and output cards, it does not actually come with inputs or outputs pre-populated. So we have to make sure that we specify what those are. And these are a few of them. You've got your analog input, analog output, and that's going to be 4 and 4, right? So there are 4 inputs, and on one analog input card, there are 4 inputs. On one analog output card, there are 4 outputs, right? So if you had 2 Sonos ports, for instance, that would fill up 1 input card because a port has 2. So 2 times 2 being 4, you get it, right? I don't see a whole lot of the digital input being used or the digital output being used. It really depends on what the source is. Most of the time, we're seeing that the use being analog because you'll be using something like the Sonos port or another streaming device or microphones. Okay. For background music, we selected in this particular case the Control 25. In that gazebo area that we were looking at, they couldn't put anything that was going to be in the ceiling because it was open air, right? And so they needed an all-weather type speaker, and they didn't want anything that was going to be too large and like the 8-inch. There's a Control 28, which is the same exact thing except it's an 8-inch woofer versus a 5 1/4-inch woofer. So the Control 25 is what we ended up selecting for this particular application because we need something that was going to be all weather, mountable onto the wall in that gazebo area, and then not too big either. You could use a 28, and then there's some other that are larger as well. But again, we always have to weigh the budget versus the space versus the application. In this particular case, we wanted the CDI 2300. There are 2 flavors of this. My favorite line of amplifications is the CDI. There's the DCI, and there are a couple of other lines from Crown as well. But in the case of the CDI, I love because you've got the drive core in this particular case. So you can see that there's a CDI drive core. And then, again, like I said, there are 2 flavors. There's the 2300, and then there's the 2300 BL. And the BL just means that it has Blue Link involved in it, so it's got a little bit of a higher price for those network ports. And this is what it looks like on the back end. If you didn't care for the Blue Link or you didn't need it because you're using the analog output and the analog output of the Blue 806 and the analog input of the amplifier, which you can see over here, so you don't need the Blue Link, then you can save yourself a little bit of money because, again, it costs to manufacture this. You're not paying for the proprietary nature of it because it's built into the cost of the amplifier, but you are paying for the manufacturer and the card on there. It's not much of a difference. You'll notice that the Ethernet port is on here, and that's for configuration and communication. Now, here's something that's really neat that I also like about this is that by having the Blue Link on here, anytime that you've got a Blue Link device, it acts as a highway. Let me rephrase. The Blue Link is a highway, but the ports on there are the on-ramps and the off-ramps to the highway. So if you've got a Blue Link enabled device like this one, and you plug in an analog input, like a Sonos port, into this input, you can then use this input and then on-ramp it onto the Blue Link without having to go directly into the processor, which I thought was really cool. So you can on-ramp via like the Blue Bib, which is a break-in box. You can off-ramp with a Blue Bob, which is a break-out box. You can on-ramp here, with the input, or you can on-ramp on the input card on the Blue 806 or any number of other ways. So if you needed 2 extra inputs and you have the flexibility of using a Blue Link enabled amplifier, you don't have to buy an entire slave processor or a master processor or a break-in box because you can just on-ramp right here on this device, which I always loved. It's a great feature that's built in. It just makes your life so much easier without having to break the bank in order to be able to add another Blue Link device. It's just really convenient. Is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah, let me add something for this device. Since we're talking about hotels at this point, usually when we design a hotel and take this as an example, the pool bar usually will receive a music feed, okay, from the main rack at the most part of the day. And at last minute, they have decided that they want to do not use that pre-programmed music and add some type of iPod device or an MP3 player locally for a couple of hours during happy hour. So that said, it means if this amplifier is sitting down at that area, at the pool bar area, we can get that signal, okay, locally, send it back to our processor, okay, and feed back again this amplifier with that specific type of music. So that's an example of how I will use this type of product in a hotel type of environment.
It's another great application, and it's one of those reasons. The drive core is just my favorite, also because it's Class D. So you're talking about 90+% efficiency here. It doesn't heat up as much as a Class AB amplifier. And you know, the old adage, I learned old school. You know, all of my mentors are all from the 60s and the 70s. You know, where analog audio was, you know, in its prime. And the problem that a lot of the older guys see when it comes to digital amplification is they don't want to do it because analog audio oftentimes, and this is the complaint, sounded better than a Class D digital amplifier did. That used to be true, and it's no longer true in my opinion, because Class D amplification has arrived to a point where the processing power and the memory, remember, we're talking digital here, so we're talking computers, where the processing power and all of this stuff has increased so dramatically and so much faster that it can process the same amount of information that an analog device would be able to in an analog method without sacrificing quality. So you can have higher bit rates, you can do all of the great, you know, sample rates, bit rates, all of that wonderful stuff, and you can take more samples and have higher quality without sacrificing anything by going Class D. So you don't shy away from Class D if that's a, you know, a fear of yours.
Yeah. Plus, Class D power consumption will be less. We can get the more powerful the channel count, the amps in a dual, you know, a two rack mount type of chassis. So those are additional benefits that we get, you know, with that type of technology nowadays.
Oh yeah, and there's DSP built into it too. So, and the analog ones have DSP, like there's the CDI 1000, 2000, and 4000. They're great. Those are great, solid Class AB amplifiers. It's a little bit less expensive than the drive core ones. But again, they're Class AB, so they're going to run a little bit warmer. As it relates, means that the lifespan won't necessarily be as long, although great. You can't go wrong with the Crown amplifier. So I don't want anybody, you know, coming off this thinking that, you know, it's an inferior product. It's just, in my opinion, the drive core, that's the way to go. It gives you a lot more flexibility. It has the Blue Link built into it. It doesn't heat up as much, so you don't have to worry about thermal dissipation inside of a rack like you would a CDI 1000. It's going to last you longer as a result. It's just all around great. Now, we selected in this particular case the AMS 1208 because we didn't need that many physical ports. We have ports, or we have switches through the Luxel brand of products that are with more ports in it. The advantage here is that we have a managed switch, it's gigabit, and it has 8 ports that are PoE as well as 2 ports that are fiber. So in this particular hotel, even though you didn't see it, it was actually 9 floors. And although we were pushing the limit to the 100 meters in order to be able to go from switch to switch via copper, RJ45 category 6 cable, sometimes it's better to just go fiber for several reasons. Number one, and I'm going to go through it, in this particular case, we've got a duplex fiber from Clearline, which has a 250-pound pull strength because it's got Kevlar aramid fibers that are built in there, Kevlar fibers that are built in, right? So in this particular case, we weren't going more than 1,000 feet, so we didn't need multi-mode. There's we didn't need single mode. We used multi-mode in this case. The SFP connector on it was a gigabit, which is fine. I mean, for crying out loud, the theoretical maximum on a single mode fiber is 40 petabits per second, petabits per second, which is insane. So, you know, we're not worried about bandwidth here because the fiber will do it. It's the SFP connector, which is right here. This is the SFP that this switch wanted. So it's a 1 gig multi-mode with an LC connector, duplex, right? So one is transmit, and the other fiber is strand is receive. And that's it, you know. This is the LC connector that you're looking for, which is also sold by Clearline Fiber. This device, which is the SFP module, this is Luxel. So between Luxel, which we reviewed, which is the switch, and the SFP connector, Clearline, which is the fiber, and the LC connector, right? So we would use 2 of these on each end, one for send, one for receive for each. And then we've got TechLogix, which would be what would be installed inside the rack for management, that device, as well as this is almost what we're doing is we're creating a patch panel. Okay. So we've got a fiber patch panel now. This is, again, TechLogix. We've got our entire infrastructure done for network between Luxel, Clearline, so Luxel for the switch, Clearline for the fiber, TechLogix for the actual devices. And it wouldn't be too dissimilar, if we were using, category cable. We use a variety of brands in order to be able to fill all those needs. But you can see that AVE, again, is the one-stop shop for all of this. And with that, you've got a complete device. If you're going longer than 1,000 feet, then you would switch over to a single mode fiber connection, SFP, and then obviously single mode the cable itself and single mode connectors. The increase in price is actually not that visible on the connector nor on the fiber itself. The price difference between a duplex multi-mode versus a duplex single mode, it's not great. It's not that different also from a category cable either. So that's not where the price change happens. It's actually in the SFP and the connectors. And once you go to single mode, even though you've got faster bandwidth on single mode and longer distances, the problem with single mode is that the electronics on either end, in this case the SFP connector, that's where the price increase, that's where you start seeing it. So just keep that in mind. In this particular case, we've got our structure cable products. So we've got our standard speaker cable. Depending on what the distance is and whether you're doing low impedance, which would be an 8 ohm, or a high impedance, which would be a 70 volts, you can use either a 14 or a 16 gauge cable. In most of these kinds of applications, you would be running 70 volts, which both the CDI, the drive core, can do 70 volt and 8 ohms. That's configurable within Audio Architect. So same exact connection point, you just configure it one or the other. It's really great, flexible. And in fact, on the drive core amplifiers, you can have one channel 8 ohm low impedance, and you can have another channel 70 volts simultaneously, which is great as well. And then we have our power protection. So this is the PL-8C from Furman. I should have taken a better picture of this so that it's actually got Furman plastered on there. But you've got your Furman device on here. And in this particular case, it's got a power conditioner and lights. And it's got a whole set of great things, so features to it. We've got proper surge protection, which this SMP technology that you can see right here, this is along with the EBS voltage protection. Those two devices, those two features, they can literally take lightning strike and keep on ticking. So we've got proper electrical protection in these devices. And when you're spending, or your end user is spending $20, $30, $40, $50,000 worth of gear, for crying out loud, please protect this device. I mean, we're talking about a $200 or a $300 or $400 power protection device on $50,000 worth of equipment. It's just a great insurance problem. And it's this Furman product in particular is non-sacrificial. So you don't have to worry about it dying to protect your device. Between the EVS and that SMP, it shunts everything down to ground. And maybe there's a Furman guy or an electrician who's listening and I'm using the wrong word, but it sends everything to where it's supposed to go, to ground, to protect your devices, and it's non-sacrificial. There's no MOVs that are built in, which are sacrificial devices inside of the power protection device. The MOV, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just a little bit less expensive. So if you need something less expensive, you can go with the Panamax. But again, it's sacrificial compared to the Furman, which is non-sacrificial. This is an example of just a rack, just to be able to round out this lobby area. This is the multi-mount rack from the Essex series from Middle Atlantic, and it's called the multi-mount rack because you can install it bolted into the floor. You can bolt it into to the wall, or you can have it on casters if you needed it to be a little bit more movable. It's just a great, kind of all-around go-to device that we like to use. Most of the Middle Atlantic products are going to come bare, so everything is a la carte. So if you need more racks, then you get, like shelves, and you get more shelves. If you need vented panels, you get vented panels. If you need lace brackets for cable management in the back, all of that's a la carte. So it's really great because it allows you to be able to build exactly as you need to go. Now, when we're talking about the fitness area, and I'm going to wrap this into what we were talking about before with the BSS, because the fitness area in this particular case was on the second to top floor, right? And so what we needed to be able to do is we needed to be able to have background music coming into the fitness area, right? And we're talking about both the spa and the fitness area. So we've got our reception area we have our lobby, we have our reception area over here, a hallway where we have a salon, a manicure, pedicure, a lounge, a tranquility space for relaxing, different treatment rooms, right? And we also had a changing space with showers and whatnot over here. But you're also going to find in a lot of these areas fitness spaces that'll have dedicated, whether it be cycling or, like a Peloton. I'm not trying to, advertise for anybody, but you'll have indoor cycling or you'll have yoga or any other kind of classes. My wife is a Zumba instructor, so she teaches, those kinds of instruction. And you need in those spaces, especially if you're doing indoor cycling, you need something that's going to be a little bit more oomph, or in fact, a lot more oomph than you would with standard background music. So that's one of the reasons that I really like to have in this kind of a space. I like to have the application engineered series of speakers. And there are a couple different lines here that I'd like for you to touch on, Jose, between the AM, the 7000 series and the 6000 series. And then there's another one that's a little bit more low cost. Why would we choose one versus the other, and why did we go with the AM 7200 series in this case?
Well, as you said, depending on the final expectations or the use of that room, for example, you were talking about bicycling, that's like a spinning room nowadays. And it means that those bicycles, they actually, depending on how many they have, they will produce, a nice amount of noise. So we have to compete with that. And for those purposes, that's why we have like different versions of these audio engineer type of speaker. So the one that we have now is the AM. That's like the top of the line. This model comes in 12 inches and 15 inches. This is a two-way speaker with a high compression driver installed on it. So if you need to compete with that type of ambience noise that we're producing in a room, this is the way to go. Okay, so what else do you have from this family in here?
We're talking about the subwoofers as well.
Subwoofers, that will be the ASAP. These are very compact and very powerful subwoofers. This one comes in 3 sizes and 2 configurations: single, 12 inches, 15 inches, and 18 inches, and dual. Okay, 12, 15, and 18. So if you need that boom boom, as Nick mentioned, some type of music, like for me in Puerto Rico will be reggaeton, probably in Aruba will be the soca. You will need definitely some help with this type of subwoofer. The last one that you have?
As far as the speakers are concerned, yeah, the next, we're going to be talking about the amplification for this.
Okay, there's a small family of these speakers that they comes in different sizes: 5 inches, 6 inches, dual 6 and dual 8s. Okay, just in case that if you don't have enough like real space or area to provide, a 12 or 15 inches type of two-way, we have smaller versions that might help you, to do the job as well.
So that leads us to the proper amplification. Now, whenever I'm designing a space, if you're new to designing audio, I always work on the outskirts of the block diagram and work my way in. So if you were here at the very beginning part of the webinar, we talked about the unmatched solution from the microphones and the sources, which are the input part of the block diagram, all the way to the speakers, which are the output part of the block diagram. Now, when we're talking about speakers and space, you can't just design speakers just for the sake of designing speakers. The space and the scope and the budget dictate what speakers we're going to use. And you can't figure out what amplifier you're going to use until you figure out what speakers you're going to use. You can't get that out of order. I can't choose an amplifier before I choose a speaker. To the contrary, it might be overpowered, it might be underpowered. So I have to pick my speakers first, and the space is going to dictate what the speakers are. right? Now, in this particular case, because we're using the top of the line, I really need some speakers that are going to give me a little bit more oomph. Now, the CDI series does, in fact, have a 4-channel, 600-watt amplifier. However, in this particular case, I needed to be able to have a version with the Blue Link, because what I wanted to be able to do, and again, there are a million ways to be able to do the exact same thing. I can make the spa and fitness area completely independent from everything else, but that means that I need to add processing. By using a Blue Link enabled amplifier, I don't need to add processing because the 806 that I was using in the lobby can be linked to this amplifier, right, via Blue Link, so that I can use the Blue 806 as my processor. And again, I can use my inputs directly on here, and I don't need to worry about processing because the Blue Link, I'm talking about one cable that goes from this device to any other Blue Link enabled device that ends up being linked back over the Blue 806, I'm good for processing. I don't need to worry about having another processor anywhere else in the system because it'll do it for us. So again, I've got my analog inputs here that I can use with a microphone and a Sonos port or another device that I wanted to. You could leave it empty for a DJ, which in a pool area is what Jose was talking about earlier. So you've got all sorts of great flexibility in those kinds of devices. Now, the N version that we were talking about here in the last slide, that means that it's networkable, which means that it has Blue Link. You can get the one that's a little bit less expensive with no Blue Link, and then there's another version if the distance were a little bit further that you could go with a Dante enabled amplifier here. Okay, and so you've got those, and so that would end instead of N, it would be DA, and the N and the DA are identical, except instead of it having a Blue Link, it has a Dante. Oh, Jose, if I remember right, there's no amplifier that has Blue Link and Dante enabled on it simultaneously, is there?
No, the industry it's making a shift, and probably for next year, this version that you're showing nowadays will be a Dante enabled amplifier. Okay, the Blue Link will be kept probably for the CDI, the smaller brother. Okay, for some other type of applications, but the way the industry it's moving forward. These amplifiers will be, Dante enabled. And once again, if you need a more powerful amplifier at this time, we do have it on DCI versions. We just have, for example, a Blue DAC, which usually will take Dante channels, convert those into Blue Link in order to be used, if you have the need for those.
And that's really great, again, because by it having either Dante or Blue Link or both in the system, and they both work within the Blue 806. So you don't have to use one or the other. You can use both depending on the application. And they will talk to each other. And that device that Jose was talking about, it's just a little box. It's called a Blue Dun. It acts like a bridge, right? And it talks both Blue Link and Dante simultaneously. You connect it over via Blue Link. Does it have a network connection? My memory fails me on this one.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
So it'll talk to all of those devices. So you're going to have Blue Link connection for transport of Blue Link audio. You'll have Dante connection for connection to the network for the transport of Dante audio. And you'll have a network connection for the purposes of communication, control, and configuration.
Yeah. Right? On top of that, DCI families, this is the model that comes, between 2-channel count, 4-channel count, up to 8-channel count. Okay. And as well, it has a bunch of features if you need to start like monitoring every single channel or monitoring that 70-volt line along the way. This is the amplifier to go. It will provide you the necessary intelligence, okay, to get your reports and status, of health.
The other neat thing that I really like about these amplifiers is that it's got a general purpose input-output. And I don't know if you guys noticed it on the CDI series as well. So you can actually do all sorts of really neat things with triggers so that the amplifier, this same amplifier, will listen to a Blue Link, the same that was going into the background music for the lobby if you wanted to, at a very low volume. And then when it does sensing for the microphone, which would be plugged into the input over here, it'll trigger a change and modify the EQ all without you having to do it. It's proper automation, which I love.
Well said. And also, if you're working with Harman and you're have like a bunch of these amplifiers in some type of relay procedure to start up or shut down the amplifiers, that GPO as well comes very, very handy.
The CN series from Harman. So it's they include power sequencing. So not only do they have power protection and voltage regulation and filtration to be able to isolate the different audio banks, because unfortunately things introduce noise onto circuits. And so you get somebody, the electricians, they don't really pay attention to it because they don't really care. Because they're just making sure that everything has electricity. So you could have one circuit breaker that is plugged into the amp rack, but is also where the cleaning person comes in and plugs in the vacuum cleaner, and now you've introduced noise. Or just as bad could be a refrigeration unit. And as soon as that compressor kicks on that refrigeration unit, and it doesn't even have to be a big refrigerator, you've introduced noise into the system. And the Harman will isolate all of those things and make sure and filter out any of those kinds of noise components. So that's a really neat thing. I just got this WMS 470 sports set for my wife. Like I told you, she's a Zumba instructor, and she loves it. This thing is great. It doesn't move off the head, so she's bouncing around and doing back and forth and practically cartwheels, and it's not going from her head, and it's safe. What we generally recommend if these are going to be shared microphones is that you get one receiving base that stays permanently affixed into the system, and you get multiple transmitters that you can license out to each of the instructors or the people who are going to be using it. That way nobody's sharing a sweaty head device. That's what we recommend, and you can program them all to be on the same frequency so that once the instructor goes in, they just flip it on, it automatically connects. When they leave, they flip it off, and there's no conflict there. You just have to be careful if you've got two instructors who are there and you get somebody who is a little bit more, trying to find the positive word to be able to say it. They're a little bit more forgetful to turn it off. If you get two transmitters that are on at the same time, the receiver can't identify which one it's supposed to listen to, so it'll cause a conflict there. It's not going to do anything damage. It's not going to work.
That's a nice selling point, Etheric. I'll be very honest with you. Never crossed my mind. And probably now, since COVID, we have to actually, make sure that every instructor has their own equipment. So nice to bring it over. I love the idea. I will use it if you don't mind.
With pleasure. So, and Jose's been using this stuff for a long time, but I was thinking about it because my wife, she teaches, both Zumba, and so she plugs it in there from the house. And then she also goes to the gym in order to be able to teach at a gym locally here. And obviously I don't want her, and she doesn't want to have to share with anybody else, as no instructor would want to. You get a sweaty head and COVID as well. And, that's kind of not pleasant. So by having multiple transmitters, or at minimum, you can have the same transmitter that you share, and then you have just a multiple headband, because you can buy this headband, which comes with the cable that plugs into the transmitter separately from the receiver, separately from the transmitter itself. So you can either choose to have an independent transmitter and headset for everybody, or just the headset, and you force them to buy their own. That way, you don't have to worry about that yuckiness, from the sweaty heads. Now, as it relates to the spa, we can do, mood lighting. So you've got these really nice little mood lights that you can create. You've obviously got, your background music. So you've got your elevator music, or your background, Zen, in order to be able to create that, your background waterfall noises and whatnot. You can do digital signage for all of these areas as well. Welcome to the spa area. And, and if you're doing booking appointments too, through BrightSign and one of their partners, the CRM partners, you can actually book, and you can say, hey, Mr. Valcarcel, or Mr. John Doe, as they come out, right? So you know what room they're going to be in because they booked the appointment ahead of time. You can actually say, okay, Mr. John Doe, your Mr. and Mrs. John and Jane Doe, your couple's massage is in the spa room number 5, and they just look, they see their name, they know which spa room they have to go to, and they just go straight there. And so with BrightSign and the CRM partners that go along with it, you can have all of that stuff automated, and it's really easy to be able to work and design. And so, in this kind of space, you've got a double treatment room, and you can do that on the outside of each room. You can have it inside each room as far as the digital signage is concerned. You've got tons of flexibility, which is awesome. Now, in this particular case, we're running everything 70 volts. In knowing me, you hear me say this all the time. There are a million ways to do the exact same thing. You can run one channel for each room independently if you so wanted to, or you can run one system 70 volts and call it a day. But then if you're running at 70 volts, it becomes a little bit more difficult in being able to control the volume in each one of those spa treatment areas independently. Harman doesn't have it, but Russ Sound does. It's a 70 volt, 50 watt volume control that just sits there on the wall. Okay. And what you do is you run, your spa treatment room number one. So you go out of the amplifier into the wall control into your spa treatment room number 3. And then you do that again into number 2. And then you do that again into number 1. And so you'd have to have a connector block, which is just a simple, speaker connector block, because everything is going in parallel, positive to positive, negative to negative. That's one way to be able to do it inexpensively. If you wanted to do it a little bit more nice, you could do each room with its own dedicated amplifier channel, and then you can use this device, which is it's a BSS device from Harman, and you've got 4 buttons with volume, and so the 4 buttons could be a source selector. The 4 buttons could be a speaker selector. The 4 buttons could be a trigger for any number of other things, with a volume knob on there. And you've got black and white options there. These other 2 options are for the European market, so we don't sell those. We just have the 1 gang space that's for our market right here. But the great thing about this is that it's flexible, and it connects directly to the network via a PoE. So you can either use a PoE injector connected to the network, or again, if you're using the managed switches from Luxel, most of them, if not all of them, are PoE enabled, so you don't have to worry about that. And what I was talking to you before, where you've got a Dante enabled amplifier here. So instead of the Blue Link, you have the Dante enabled device. And again, the Ethernet, that's for control and configuration, and then your Dante enabled devices. In this particular case, you'll notice that this is the backside of one of the big boys. So that's not the backside to the 300, it's the backside to another large device. So don't get scared on that. But you've got the same general purpose input output. You've got your on ramp with your inputs. You've got your outputs as you normally do. And this can be both 70 volts and it can be low impedance. All of that's configurable, and you can have 1 channel or 2 channels, one, and the other 2 channels the other. It's completely flexible. In this particular case, we wanted to kind of normalize. There are 3 different lines from your speakers that are your go-to. There's the 10 series, the 20 series, and the 40 series. Again, all of this is going to be dictated based on what the budget is going to allow for. The 20 series is the in between. It's kind of the go-to. It's not the best in quality. It's not the most entry level in quality. The 6 being the 6.5 inch, the C being in ceiling, and then the T allowing for a transformer. For the interest of time, I mean, we could talk an hour and a half just about the entire JBL series of speakers. But in the interest of time, we'll just kind of do some of the highlights. In the pool space, what we've got is a really neat function. So we've got our Martin lighting again, so we can have our great architectural lighting. This is what the actual space looks like. So you have, in this particular case, the pool, which goes all the way down where I'm highlighting here. That's the actual physical pool. These areas right here are rooms. It's not outlined here, but all of this space is inside with rooms that has essentially a sliding glass door with stairs that go straight out to the pool. This is a wooden pool deck area here, a wooden pool deck area here, kind of a shallow area so you can wade in or be with your kids. And then all of this area on the outside is concrete, which is the pool deck. Okay, and then you've got a gazebo area, right, which has a bar which serves both the pool area, so that these pool bar those are actually in the water. So you can sit in the water and have your drinks. And then you have an external area for people to be able to walk up while they're lounging on the deck. And so in this particular case, we wanted to be able to get background music going out here, as well as these are this area right here, and this area right here, and this area right here. This is all like a little garden area. So you've got, plants and trees and whatnot for background, as well as this area, and this area. So we wanted a mixture of different kinds of speakers here. And amongst that is going to be your Control 80 series. There are two sizes. There's the 5 1/4 inch and then the 5/8 of the 8 inch. And this is designed for background. It's our, colloquially known as the mushroom landscape speakers that famously look like some of our competitors. It's very simple. It's easy to use. They include a 70-volt transformer, and all speakers can be used at 8 ohms. This is the Blue Don, what we were talking about before, which links between Blue Link and Dante. It's just a little bridge. And so what we did in this particular case is we went out Dante into the network switch via fiber because of the distance. And then we went from the network switch coax into the Dante here. Then we used the Blue Link in order to be able to go into our network DCI amplification. And in this case, we were just going 70 volts. Now, the other option that we could have done was bypass the Blue Don and go with a Dante-enabled amplifier. Again, the network versus the Dante, it's the same price on the amplification, but I think we had to do it this way because of the availability of the amplification. The Dante had a slight back order on it, and the Blue Link was more readily available. But again, there are a million ways to be able to do the exact same thing. Now, for the DJ area, which was built in, so there's the bar. This is all bar. And in the center of the bar, you can see that there's some sinks here and there's some sinks here. There was a DJ area that had a little stairwell that the DJ could sit, and then we wanted to install speakers on the outside, and then we wanted really beefy speakers on the outside, on this side facing the pool, the actual deck, and the smaller speakers facing inside the pool itself. So for the inside area, we went with the Control 28. So if you remember, the background music that we used in the lobby area and the outside in that pathway was the 25s. This is the 28s because we wanted to be able to throw audio a little bit further and have a little bit more richness on the bass. And then we also had some Control 29 ADs. Now, the 29 and the 30 series is kind of like a different series, even though it's the same similar format. Jose, but what makes the 29 and the 30 series so special compared to the 25 and the 28, in your opinion, Jose?
The main difference, both the 29, the 30, and the 31, it uses a high compression driver, a 1-inch compression driver. So if you want to get loud enough, this is the models that you should be thinking about it. As the past slides say, in the 28, it's a nice asset, but it's mostly for foreground, background music. If you are planning to use, as the example that you brought over, someone to do some, water aerobics, and you're pretending to send that, female voice through this type of speakers, my advice will be go with Control 29 and up. There you have a compression driver that will be, sufficient to handle the voice signal without, any type of distortion or doing damage to the actual speaker.
And then, thank you. And then the third option, and honestly, my favorite, is the all-weather series. So there are two flavors to these all-weather series. There's the compact, which is a coaxial speaker, which in my opinion is more of a background audio speaker. And then you have the speakers that are the non-compact, which is an example that you see on the screen now. This AW266 is a 12-inch low-frequency driver. It is a high power. This is your point source. This is for your high volume, high impact. Your DJ wants to make it go boom. This is what's going to make it go boom. Now, the advantage, though, of the subwoofers that we were talking about before, because if you remember, we used the ASB 6112. There's the AL, the 7115, if you needed something bigger, or the 6115. And we talked about the differences. All of these speakers or all of these subwoofers that you find on here can be weatherized, right? So they're made to order. There are two kinds of weatherization. There's the WRC and there's the WRX. Now, Jose, what's the difference between the WRC and the WRX as it relates to weatherization?
WRC, that type of treatment, it's the way I see it, and the purpose of those treatments. If your subwoofer is not gonna be 24/7 under extreme, exactly, to the nature, you will go with the WRC treatment. Okay, that will increase probably a 40% from the usual baseline of, for example, on SAB 6115. Let's say that your cost, okay, dealers is $500. So from there, if I decide to go with a WRC type of treatment, that's like a 40% increase in price. Okay, and it's not the way actually to that speaker to be 24/7 under that type of environment. My advice would be, and since most of the people that I have here belong to islands, and we do have beaches and that type of environment, I will go with the exactly WRX, which is a treatment to be 24/7, sitting down on the sand and all that type of harsh environment. So that's it. 500 plus 40 for the WRC. Once you get the price for the WRC, to get the WR Extreme, the treatment is just an additional 10%. And from there, you have a speaker that it's once again can handle that 24/7 harsh environment.
Now, that can be true of not just the subwoofers, but also the application engineers. So the AM series that we were looking before, and then the compact, and then the other ones, those also have a similar treatment that we can add too, correct?
That can be done, and as well. Usually the basic colors are black and white for those purposes. But this series, if you need, once again, if you don't want to deal with the AWs that you brought over, and you need something more powerful regarding that line, we can do those treatments, WRC and WRX, just in case.
So, and just bear in mind that when we order those, we need to make sure that the customers understand that those are made to order, and those are done in Mexico, right, Jose?
That is correct, and usually the lead time might take up to 10 to 12 weeks nowadays due to COVID. Okay, actually, yesterday I was in a meeting for an amusement park that is being built in Mexico, near Guadalajara. I cannot provide more details, but most of the speakers that are already spec are from this line, and all are with this type of treatment, WRX.
And it's a great line. I love that application engineer, but depends again what the budget is. I gave you guys, 3 different options there. So there was a Control 28, which is a little beefier, than the 2025, just a little bit bigger of a woofer. If you wanted a little bit more premium, you have the 29 AV. There's the 30 AV, which is slightly larger as well, and slightly more powerful. If you and both of those are 2-way. There's the 31, which is a 3-way speaker, so it requires a little bit unique of a amplification. And then there's the AW series, which is all weather, or you can go even bigger. I mean, there's so many options. What we're always talking about. This is the exterior in-ground that we were talking about at the very beginning. So obviously we've got our, you can see the NaCl. I don't know if you guys noticed that. NaCl, if you're unfamiliar, that's the chemical formula for salt. So we can see that we're IP67. 5-year warranty. It can take a beating and keep on ticking with that IK10 rating. You can run over this with a dump truck. It's meant to be flush mounted into the concrete. You can run over this with a dump truck and it's going to have no problems taking it. And then it's also saltwater resistant as well. So this is a great device. Once it's in the ground into the concrete, it's not going anywhere. So just bear that in mind because it is in the concrete. You would have to chisel that out with probably a jackhammer because it's not coming out. And that's designed to be in there for 20 years, which is great. These are actually installed, if my memory serves me right, Jose, these are installed in the mosque over in Saudi Arabia, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, one of those famous mosques, no?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And as well, I have seen this model also as well in many cathedrals in Mexico. Okay. So yes, it's a very nice asset. This also takes some time of lead time. You can request the backend, okay, in order to get that into the concrete area. And after the final construction, you can calmly install the lights into the system.
And these are made in Denmark?
Yes, they are.
Yep. It's all custom made to order. Again, with that binning process, Martin lights are all made in Denmark with great quality, really phenomenal product. Okay. Switching gears just a little bit, we're talking about ballrooms and conference rooms. It's a lot of the same thing. We could have talked a little bit about the Ascendo system. I go over that in another. Oh, we do actually. It'll be the next slide here that we're talking about. And I didn't translate this. Forgive me. So we're talking about rooms that are combinable or separatable, that have the flexibility of being put all in one, or have the flexibility of being kept separate. And you need that level of stuff. So on the outside, some of the things that you would do is you would have a booking or a room meeting schedule. This integrates with Office 365, which is Microsoft Exchange, as well as the Google Calendar, without requiring any other kind of hardware. So when you first load this MD702 and you install it and you power it up, it gives you two options. You can make it into this Ascendo book system, which then it's going to ask you about the login information for the Office or the Google. Or what you're doing is you're using it as a control touch panel for an AMX system. It cannot do both simultaneously. It's one or the other, right? And then if you're using it in this Ascendo book, it gives you this red when it's occupied, and it gives you the green if it's not occupied. And then there are two flavors to it. You can either use it to be able to visually see what's in there or what's coming up, and then you can also use it to book rooms. But if my memory serves me right, because in certain applications, Jose, you don't necessarily want people to be able to book it on the panel itself, you can block that feature out, correct?
You can block it down. It's up to the administrator, actually, to provide those privileges, just in case that you want people to be able to book the room, or just simply to be able to see what's going on through the day and ask them the correct person to make the booking for you.
Perfect. Now, in a lot of these kinds of applications, you're going to be using not just a presentation switcher, because you need to. What's the difference between a presentation and a regular switcher? Oftentimes it has to do with how fast it can change from one source to another and how clean it's going to do it, whether it's a fade to black, a dip to white, whether it's going to be a crossover fade, and keeping that EDIT information. Whereas a switcher that is not a presentation switcher will do the switch, but it may not hold the EDIT information involved in there. So there may be a little bit of a negotiation that it has to do. As a result, the presentation switchers are oftentimes a little bit more expensive. The advantage of that presentation switcher is, again, it's going to hold that EDIT information. You're not going to have that fade. You're not going to have that black where it's going to be waiting for that EDIT and that handshake to happen between one source and another. This particular series, the DVX, is a great series because it's got a lot of great inputs and outputs on it. It has the presentation ability. It also has not only the physical HDMI and the physical inputs and outputs, but it also has the DX link. Now, DX link is a proprietary feature to the Harman, but it's using HD-base-T. So it's interchangeable with an HD-base-T transmitter or receiver. So if you have, for instance, an HD-base-T wall plate that they already had existing, right? Let's say it's from a competitive brand. You can connect it directly into one of these DX links and it'll work, right? You don't have to change it out. If it's a fresh, then you can use one of our DX Link wall plate transmitters, and it does additional features than just a standard HD-base-T. But that's the advantage of using the DX Link. So it's got your HDMI inputs, your DX Link inputs. It's got your HDMI outputs, your DX Link outputs, which is really great. It's enabled with Dante, so you can link right into the Dante, which is awesome, and hook it up straight in with the BSS system. And it has the NX controller that's built in. So if you needed something that was going to be a little bit more involved, then you can use the NX controller with programming, and you've got a really flexible system here. You've also got your microphone inputs and other analog inputs, as well as your analog outputs, and a very simple analog, or rather amplification output, depending on what you need. So depending on the speaker system and the control, you can use your analog outputs into a standard amplifier in conjunction with your amplified, or you can bypass that amplification at all. Is there anything else that you wanted to add to this device, Jose?
Nothing. This device, it's, well, I will say this is very lovely. My main point of sale is that it has Dante enabled. So I'm able to bring 8 independent channels of Dante into this switcher. So if I do have a background music around the property and I need to feed that room specifically with that music, I can do it. And as well, if I need to combine rooms and send additional signal through my Dante network, I will be able to handle that up. Plus, on top, you have the automation process, which you mentioned already.
Yep. All of that, which is just so flexible and easy to be able to use. So this is your DX-Link 4K HDMI Decor style, your wall plate transmitter. There are receiving devices, which is not generally going to be in a wall plate format because it'll generally be either behind a monitor or it will be behind a projector. Now, bear in mind that the NEC projectors, some of the models include an HDBaseT input. So you may not even need a receiving device because you would go output of the DX-Link out, which you see over here, number 3 or number 4, straight into the projector if that's what it is that you needed to be able to do. Right? This is another, this is one example of a keypad that you can use, which is simple. You know, again, it all really depends on the complexity that you want to be able to offer to the customer. The more features you do, the more it's going to cost, obviously, but sometimes simple is better. And so you've got this Metro 6-button Ethernet keypad, which again connects to just the network and you can call it a day. Or you can have a 7-inch or 10-inch touch panel. This is the 10-inch version of the one that we saw before that was showing the Ascendo book, right? So these are all powered by PoE and connected directly to the network, and they talk to the NX controller that's built into the DVX device. You can create macros. This is completely customizable. It's a touch panel, so you can put whatever buttons it is that you want. A neat little feature here that you can also do is you've got your architectural connectivity with the HPX series of your, that would fit right inside the table. These are all completely configurable, so you can put whatever sources or whatever devices it is that you need right built into it, which is really handy. And then you've got, as we wrap up, as I had mentioned before, this is one example of the projectors that you could use. And as you can see, you have the HDBaseT input. And then if you needed to go to another projector that was showing the exact same thing, instead of splitting the device, you just go HDBaseT out into the second projector that has HDBaseT in. So it becomes really easy to be able to daisy chain those and not have to worry about running. The advantage again of HDBaseT is you've got another 100 meters. No, it depends on the kind of HDBaseT. You got type A, B, C, and D. So we have to verify that, but you can go generally about 70 to 100 feet without any problems. We do have active optical cables. I did not include that in this presentation. From Clearline Cable, we can do 50 meters of HDMI 8K. So that's a 48 gigabit per second HDMI cable that you can run. The downside of that is that it's obviously got an HDMI head on it, so it might be a little bit more difficult for you to be able to pull through a conduit. But you do have 50 meters there, so if your conduit is big enough, you can run that before you run your Ethernet cable and then terminate that, or your fiber cable and terminate those. Again, a lot of flexibility there. With that being said, I know that we went over a lot. There's plenty of time for Q&A. I see that we've got one here. The DMX control transmission. So you're talking about, Michael, specifically DMX as it relates to lighting. Is that what you're referring to? Yeah, okay. So let me just wrap this up. I'll stop the recording and then we'll go into Q&A. So the next, what we're talking about next is going to be on the 18th of May in 2 weeks, where we're going to be talking about configurations for restaurants. So make sure that you hit that up. It's going to be packed full of information, just like we went over today, and it's going to again be the building blocks. So we're going to talk about how you can make a restaurant independent, but you also how to be able to make the restaurant work with the Blue 806 and how we have it. Because in a hotel, you can have retail spaces, you can have restaurant spaces, you can have spa and fitness spaces all within the same hotel, depending on the hotel, which is really, really neat. That being said,